Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and today's tournament vlog is pretty cool for me. Now, I know these aren't the greatest videos, unfortunately, and that's because at the tournament at War Games Workshop, ran by the Outriders MK, we have limited time per game, and so I can't spend the time to take a lot of pictures, videos, or take extensive notes. And really that leaves me with just the few pictures I do take and my poor memory to form these videos, and that really stops me from doing proper battle reports in this context. So instead I try to discuss my intentions, my tactics and plans of how I approach a game and how that actually plays out in the game, because at least that's something interesting that can be learned from, and it shows my progression from my own tactics. So let's start with the choice of my force, and I am taking the US Army, which I've been fairly successful with before. With the new platoon system for 3rd edition, I've been considering how that works, and what's silly and what's fun and what's a waste of time. To test out some of that, I'm going with just 2 platoons today, a rifle and an armoured, rather than 3 or 4 platoons, which most people are trying. What this does is it lets me focus on a few big kind of focused things, rather than having a lot of mixed types of units and support and all of that kind of stuff, which is what people are tending on doing, because having options is having options. My core then is a rifle platoon with 4 big squads, or it would have been 4 fully filled out squads if I had more riflemen. As it stands, I'm using every single rifle model that I own. These first 2 are 12 models each, and there's 4 submachine guns between them. They can either be 2 and 2 or 4 and none, depends on the game. Behind them are the Marines, and I've used them before. They've got 3 shotguns, 3 submachine guns, and they'll be on the half track. And at the back is a BAR squad, and they have 3 BARs. In 2nd edition, the light machine gun was considered totally rubbish, and the BAR was considered mandatory. And in 3rd edition, the BAR holds the same consideration that the light machine guns used to. I still think that the BAR has some value, but primarily when used in a focused support squad like this. As I'm only using 2 platoons, I will fill out a lot of the options for HQ and light support in the rifle platoon. So I have a light mortar, a bazooka and a sniper, and my LT and air observer both have 2 assistants, and I think that the air observer, especially for the Americans, but for any army really, the air observer is better than the artillery observer. For my 2nd platoon, obviously an armoured platoon with an M10, and then a Stuart and a Greyhound with the light guns. And overall this means I have plenty of little anti-armour around the list, but only the M10 has a proper anti-armour weapon, and hopefully that leans in my favour. So the general plan is to push up a big blob of infantry, keeping them supported with the vehicles and the light weapons, get onto objectives and win. So let's look at our first game. There is a little roadblock with some buildings, and we're deploying on the long board edge, and our objective is just kill points. And what that means is that I really need to stick together. Mutual support will help me keep points from my opponent, and aggressive pushing up will earn me my own points. With the big open ground diagonally down the road, I thought that sending most of my force up one side and a distraction force up the other would be best. Now, as we deployed, my opponent also split in 2, one on each side of the road, and that led me to put more in my distraction force than I had initially planned. My right flank here, with the building off camera as well, is my primary push. Steamroll their left flank with my right flank, and if I have time left, move across their back line to earn some last minute points. And here is my distraction force, the BAR and the 2 light vehicles. I hoped this would be enough to put up a fight without giving my opponent too many easy points. But they ended up against a lot. Several squads, heavy weapons, including a Panzerschreck which had snuck into one of the buildings. And this didn't go well. They didn't manage to take out the Panzerschreck quickly enough, and another long-range shot took out the Greyhound as well. My distraction force did, however, account for a squad and an officer and the Panzerschreck eventually, so it wasn't a total loss, 3 for 3. But with my 2 light vehicles out and all of the rest of my anti-armour in a different postcode on the other side of the board, the Lynx and Fallschirmjäger that came on my left flank really had no resistance. I had nothing to fight them. The right flank really had been the strong side for me, as was intended, and it was also quite successful. I was able to keep my vehicles in partial cover, with the weapons teams having decent lines of sight. We did sprint up the half track and the Marines jumped out and got themselves into a spot of bother, thinking this wall would protect them, and the enemy just walked around it to shoot at them point blank. With the Marines in trouble, my half-track's heavy machine gun, the observers' rifles, and a whole big mob of riflemen came to their aid, and surprisingly that worked, and the Marines survived. My enemy's left flank completely disappeared after a few turns, and at the end of the game I was just moving across their back line. My last move was the duscuss. Too far to shoot any vehicles, but I tried that new shape charge versus buildings rule. Unfortunately I missed, but I'll try it again sometime. I ended up at the end of the game with quite a few points and overall a win. Not that it was easy, it was a tough fight, and it really relied on heavily weighting my forces and, more important even than that, having the units able to mutually support each other. My second game of the 2 games today, this was like a football game in that it was a game of 2 halves. We had a river in the middle and our objective was to take the bridge in the centre. I had a lot of long walls on the right and it would take a lot of getting around, so I sent my vehicles in this direction, which was a mistake. My left was a little more accessible, but still lots of cover, and that felt good for my infantry, my support weapons, and I spread them over this area, and this was also a mistake. My opponent, well, my infantry were facing a mechanised infantry platoon, and sure, open tops in a village, not great for them, but they do still have the advantage. And on the right, a panther, yay, that's just, So long as my M10 can do its job against the panther, maybe my right flank will hold enough to pour fire over onto the left to support them, because they are going to need it. My first airstrike was a dud. Great. And the vehicles took way too long to manoeuvre around those walls, probably 3 turns before they actually got into the game. And on top of that, the duel between the M10 and Panther, well, it didn't go my way. After losing the M10, I managed to stack a whole bunch of pins on the Panther, just over and over again, more and more pins, but not enough to break it. And then it just stayed down at the end of the turn to clear all of the pins. Eventually, on the 3rd or 4th attempt, my duscuss put a rocket into the back at point blank. You'd think it had managed it sooner, but it did eventually take out that Panther, freeing up all of my right flank to go over to the left, where they were sorely needed, because the mechanised infantry just had such a strong presence. I couldn't push up on them. I barely could even scratch them. Even my Stuart trying to flee the Panther got taken out by a Panzerschreck before it helped even in the slightest. However, everything changed very suddenly. I managed to charge one of the vehicles and the squad on board came out to defend it, and I won that combat, and that had been my enemy's biggest infantry squad. I didn't know that, but it was kind of significant. Immediately after that, my second airstrike came in and blew up not one but both of the little 250s, including the LT on board one of them. However, by that time, I really didn't have much left on the left. I didn't have many models remaining on my left flank, so I focused on the enemy small teams so at least I could whittle down their numbers, and that worked really surprisingly well. As my right flank arrived, I got lucky on a few even long-range shots. I got good rolls on charges, I got good rolls on morale tests, and my big infantry squad, chucking a handful of dice, finished off my opponent's last infantry squad as well. This whole game was hard fought, and it kind of feels like it was decided by the dice rather than any tactical decision. But somehow, my right flank managed to roll in and win both the fight on the right and turn around and win the fight on the left, leaving my opponent with a grand total of 3 models at the end of the game. So in this game, just like my first, sticking together, mutually supporting units, focusing on the dangerous enemy first, perhaps. These are tactics concepts, they work really well with the US in Bolt Action 3rd edition, although I lost a lot more models in my second game than I had in my first. But that does mean 2 wins, and that put me at the top of the scoreboard for the day, and in fact, for the first time in 2 years of playing these tournaments, I won. Now, caveats. It was a quiet day, so there were fewer opponents to beat. The US is my strongest army, and there was another player who nearly also got 2 wins, but just to a sneaky charge in the last turn, ended up with a draw. But still, a win is a win, and my prize today was a discount for something that I will be showing off in a future video. So with my regular reminder for you to go out and play games because it's fun, and if you want to play well, consider things as you play. Assume you're going to lose, but think of the things that you're going to do better next time. Try different things, work out what works and what doesn't, because for today's win, even with the caveats I mentioned earlier, it is partially the result of quite a few games with the Americans that I've played, and I've learned how to bloody well stick together. But yes, I won, feeling pretty good. Let's bring the Italians next time because they don't have a chance of winning. Anyway, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.